In this video, we want to cover how to retrieve this data. However, in order to be able to retrieve a listing, we need to actually have listings in our database. And currently, we have none. So I'm going to show you how to add an entry to the database. Let's start by giving it an address, a short description, number of bats, number of beds, a price, square footage, and then we can give it a status. So I created a listing. I just need to reload. And we can see the listing I made. I'm going to go ahead and add some more into our database. I have some houses in the database, and now we can display them. Right now, my whole page is a container alignment column, and I'm going to go ahead and add a group here. That is just going to be a row. I want it to stretch all the way across, and then the height can just fit height to content. I'm going to make this our wireframe. In case you remember, what we need to do is give it a flat color background of any color and then 10% opacity. Now we can see that, and since I use the wireframe on the header too, we see that reflected, and it's really easy to see when we keep stacking groups, which is what we're going to do here. In the middle of this group, so I'm going to make this group center aligned, I want to have a column group. I am going to say, I'm going to give it a min width of 200 and say fit width to content, and then it is currently fitting its height to content, which is fine. So let's rename this group listing, and I'm going to make it our wireframe. Over here we can see this type of content, and if we look at it, we can see this option data types. If we select listing, that makes this group sort of a variable that can hold a listing when given a data source. We can retrieve a listing from our database, and that can be stored in this group, and then we can reference it. Let me show you what I mean. First, let's look at grabbing the actual listing from our database. I want to do a search for listings. This will retrieve all of the listings in the database, but this group can really only store one listing. I just want to show you some of the different things you can do with this, and I actually want to sort my search for listings by creation date, and I want it to be descending. So we are going to get the most recent listing. Then I'm going to do first item, which is just going to grab the first item of this list of listings that's sorted by created date. So essentially it's grabbing the most recently created listing. If we look in our database, we can see that we can actually edit the fields that are shown, and since we are sorting by created date, I'm going to make sure we can see that, and we can see that the most recently created one is this Mackenzie Avenue. We can preview this, and given that debug mode equals true, we can then inspect this group over here, and we can see that its listing is Mackenzie Avenue, and it is storing this listing because it's doing a search for all of the listings, which is returning all of the listings in the database. Then it is sorting it by created date, so the first one is the most recently created one, and then it's just grabbing the first item. Perfect, so now we are storing this group. Let's actually do something with it. I'm going to grab an image and drop it in here. I want this to just stretch the entirety of the group, and then we can say fit height to content. If we want a static image, we can just upload one, but that's actually not what I want. I want a dynamic image. Dynamic data is data that is populated from any of these data sources. It's not something that I upload, rather it's something we grab from the database or another source. I want to grab the parent group's listing. Since this image is inside of this group that's storing Mackenzie Avenue, I just want to grab that Mackenzie Avenue and then grab Mackenzie Avenue's pictures URL. This is going to grab the address of the image, and then it's going to be able to display that. Over here, I also want to say keep the aspect ratio fixed, so it's just not stretching the image out in a weird way. I'm actually not sure what the aspect ratio of it is, but I am pretty sure it's a 3:2. We will see. I'm going to go back here and we can refresh this, and we can see that we are actually seeing the image associated with Mackenzie Avenue, which is this one. We can keep stacking stuff. I'm actually going to go to our group listing and expand its minimum height just so that we have some more room to work with. We can always delete that after. Let's add some text in here. I want to add the parent group's listings price, just to show you that we can sort of play around with formatting as well. I'm going to say formatted as a currency. That way we can add in this little $sign, and then we can have a comma as the thousandth separator. I just think that'll look a little nicer. I want to remove the min width, remove the min height, and say fit width to content. And then I don't want body, let's do heading 5. We can preview this, and this is exactly what we want. I'm just going to copy paste that over, except this time we are going to do parent groups listings beds, and then I just want to remove the extra formatting. I also want to show you that in addition to dynamic data, you can add static data that you just type in. So I'm going to say parent group listings beds, and that is what we see, 6 beds. I'm going to make this body again, and then in addition to beds, I also want to show bats, and then this can be bats, and then I want to show square footage. This we can also format in as a number with a thousand separator as a comma. And then instead of bats, I want to say square feet. Right now, these 3 are stacked like this, and honestly, I prefer to have them all on the same line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of them and say group elements in a row container. That's going to put them flat like this. And then we can go ahead and edit that. I'm going to rename it from group listing. we can do group beds, bats, square feet. I want this to have 8 pixels of, actually 16 pixels of column gap, and it can just be stacked like that. Great. The last thing I want to add is the parent group's listings address, and then we can just remove that. This is looking great. I think we can go ahead and remove this min height. It'll automatically fit its height to content, so this excess, watch, it'll just condense. I want to add some padding on these sides, but I want this image to actually stretch end to end like it is right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group the row and then these two texts in a column container. I want this column container to have 8 pixels of row gap and then padding on the left and right. We can do 16 pixels. Perfect. I'm going to actually also add some on the bottom. And it's looking great. One last thing, I want to show a little thing on the side that will show what the status of the listing is. For that, I'm going to use a floating group. It'll just live on top of this picture, and that's exactly what we want. I want the width to be 120 and the height to be 40 with 16 pixels of top padding and left padding. So over here and over here. We can make an align to parent container layout and then make it fixed width and fixed height. I want there to be 8 pixels of roundness, and now we can look at the actual thing. I want to be able to show this group listings status. To do that, I need to be able to grab that listing. So I'm going to make this floating group of type content listing, and its data source is going to be just its parent group's listing, which, if you remember, is this group listing. Now I can add some text inside of there. I want it to just stay in the center. It can be a fit width to content and fit height to content. And then it should just say the parent group's listing, which in this case is the floating group's status is display, which is a fancy word for the name of an option set. We can work on some styling. I could make this yellow, for instance, but I don't think that is the most important, and we can work on that a little later. If we preview this, we see this little available dialog exactly how we want. Hindsight, I could have made it smaller, a little prettier, but we can work on that later. So right now I am showing one listing. What if I want to show all of them and show a bunch of things like this, like you would see on Redfin, for example? That's what we are going to cover in the next video.